Imagine a boy standing at a crossroads. In one hand, a letter from his birth father, the poor dad. It preaches safety, steady jobs, and keeping a tight grip on money. In the other hand, a letter from his best friend's father, the rich dad. It whispers of risks, entrepreneurship, and making money work for him. This boy's name is Robert, and the choices he makes will either keep him trapped in a lifetime of paycheck-to-paycheck struggles or unlock the door to financial freedom. What would you choose? Stability or risk? Security or freedom? Hold that thought. Robert's story didn't start with stacks of cash or luxury. It started in a quiet suburb where two men shaped his understanding of money in opposite directions. One was his biological father, a highly educated, hardworking school teacher who believed in the traditional path. Get good grades, go to college, find a stable job, and work your whole life for a paycheck. Robert called him the poor dad, not because he lacked care or effort, but because his beliefs about money kept him stuck in a financial struggle. The other was his best friend Mike's father, a businessman with a different kind of education. Rich Dad, as Robert called him. Rich Dad didn't emphasize degrees. He valued financial knowledge, investing, and thinking creatively about wealth building. He knew how to make money work for him instead of working his whole life for money. From a young age, Robert heard two opposing voices shaping his future. Go to school, get a safe job, said poor dad. Learn how money works, or you'll never be free, said rich dad. The tension built. Which voice would he follow? And why did so many people seem to pick the poor dad's advice, only to struggle financially their entire lives? It's a question that Robert wrestled with through childhood, a question every viewer should ask themselves today. Why does society celebrate job security but rarely teach how to build wealth? Why do colleges prepare students for paychecks but never for financial freedom? Robert's answer? Because most people don't understand money, the true language of wealth. At 9 years old, Robert was given a strange but life-changing opportunity. Rich Dad said, I'll teach you the secrets of money, but you won't get a paycheck. Instead, your job is to watch, learn, and ask questions. No money? That felt like punishment. But Robert was curious. He worked odd jobs for Rich Dad, shining shoes, mowing lawns, running errands. But there was no paycheck at the end of the day. Why? Because Rich Dad wanted to teach a lesson far bigger than income. He wanted Robert to escape the work for money trap. And learning this lesson wasn't easy. Frustration tore through Robert like stormy waves. He wanted to quit. But each time, Rich Dad's words echoed. If you want to be rich, you have to learn how to make money work for you, not the other way around. The seed was planted. Robert's early days working for Rich Dad were filled with confusion. He did jobs that were simple, washing windows, fetching tools, organizing paperwork. Yet, at the end of the day, no cash appeared in his hands. His young mind wrestled with the question, why work and not get paid? Rich Dad's answer was simple, but profound. Money isn't about working hard, Robert. It's about working smart. You'll learn to see money like a chess game, to anticipate moves, risks, and rewards. One summer afternoon, Rich Dad handed Robert and his friend Mike a challenge. Start a business, something small, something real. Use your brains, not your backs. Show me you're thinking like a rich man. Robert and Mike brainstormed. They noticed that their neighborhood kids loved comic books, but didn't always have money to buy them. What if they created a comic book library where kids could pay a small fee and read as many comics as they wanted? They scraped together some money to buy old comics from thrift stores and neighbors. Soon enough, their little library was a hit. More kids signed up every week. The money started flowing in, even when Robert was at school or sleeping. This was Robert's first taste of a true asset, something that put money in his pocket without needing him to work constantly. Rich Dad smiled when he heard the news. This is your first lesson. Assets create income even when you're not working. Liabilities drain you no matter how much you have. Robert thought about his family's new car, shiny but costly. Is the car an asset? He asked Rich Dad. Rich Dad laughed gently. If it costs you money every month without making you money back, it's a liability disguised as an asset. The realization hit Robert hard. Most people, even his own family, misunderstood assets. They chased things that looked valuable but never made them financially free. As weeks passed, Robert's curiosity deepened. He observed how poor Dad worried about bills and how every paycheck was quickly spent. Meanwhile, Rich Dad's investments in businesses quietly generated money no matter what. Rich Dad introduced Robert to the cash flow quadrant, a way to understand how people earn money. There were four groups: employees, self-employed, business owners, and investors. Employees trade time for money. They work about and get a paycheck, Rich Dad explained. Self-employed people own their jobs, but if they don't work, their income stops. Business owners have systems and people working for them. They build assets. Investors make their money grow by making smart choices. Robert realized he was stuck seeing himself as an employee, dependent on a monthly paycheck. But Rich Dad challenged him to think bigger. Which quadrant do you want to be in when you're 30, 40, 50? Rich Dad asked. Robert felt a spark. The path to freedom was clear, but hard. It would need courage and constant learning. So Robert dove into books, attended seminars, and studied money like a language. He learned accounting basics, how to read financial statements, and how investment worked. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. Fear was real. Fear of losing money, fear of judgment, fear of failing. Once, Robert almost abandoned a risky investment because the market shifted suddenly. His heart pounded, but Rich Dad's voice echoed. Rich people manage fear. Poor people let fear manage them. Holding his ground, Robert learned how to calculate risks, set limits, and bounce back. Over time, Robert's world changed. The lessons from Rich Dad weren't just about money. They were about mindset, courage, and seeing opportunity where others saw danger. He realized that the biggest asset anyone can build is financial education, the ability to make smart decisions and control your own money story. By the time Robert was a teenager, the little comic book library had grown. He made enough passive income to buy his own things, and more importantly, he had tasted freedom. His two dads still loomed large in his life, but now Robert was choosing which teachings to follow. The message was clear. Working hard for money alone isn't the path to wealth. Making money work for you, understanding assets and liabilities, and mastering your mindset, that's the way. The journey wasn't easy. There were mistakes, setbacks, and times when quitting seemed the easier choice. But the vision of freedom kept Robert moving forward. The comic book library was just the beginning. Robert's hunger grew. He wanted more than just pocket money. He wanted to understand how the wealthy build entire lives around their assets. He started paying closer attention to Rich Dad's habits, how he bought properties, started businesses, and treated every dollar as a potential seed for an even bigger harvest. One weekend, Rich Dad took Robert and Mike to visit a few investment properties. The houses were old and needed work, but Rich Dad saw something nobody else in the neighborhood did. Opportunity. Most people see problems, he told the boys quietly. I see chances to make money. Can you? On those silent walks through dusty living rooms and cluttered backyards, Robert learned gentle lessons. A leaky roof was more than a nuisance. It was bargaining power. Ugly paint, untrimmed grass, broken doors, each imperfection was a negotiation tool. Rich Dad wasn't chasing perfection. He was hunting for potential, invisible to those afraid of a little risk and a little dirt. After the tours, Rich Dad sat with Robert and Mike over greasy burgers. Everyone else in the restaurant was relaxing, but Rich Dad sketched numbers on a napkin. Here's what the house costs. Here's what I'll spend fixing it up. Here's the rent I'll collect each month. See the difference? That's cash flow. And when the price of the house rises, that's a bonus. Wealth isn't made working more hours. It's made when your money is out there working for you. The impact was profound. Robert began to view the world through new eyes. He saw people clinging to jobs, terrified to lose their paychecks. He saw families celebrating purchases, shiny cars, bigger TVs, never realizing these were slowly draining their future. It struck him. Most adults spent their lives collecting liabilities, calling them assets, and wondering why the struggle never ended. Emboldened, Robert started small. He and Mike tried new ventures, renting out tools, mowing more lawns, even helping neighbors host weekend yard sales for a fee. Each experiment brought new lessons about competition, trust, numbers, and sometimes failure. Not every plan worked. Sometimes they broke even. Sometimes they lost a little money. But every setback fueled Robert's curiosity. Instead of being afraid of mistakes, he became obsessed with learning from them. Rich Dad was never far behind. He welcomed each failure as a chance to teach. Don't be afraid of losing a little money, he said. Be afraid of staying ignorant your whole life. Robert could see the contrast at home. Poor Dad loved security. He was proud of his job and his title. He believed that with enough education and seniority, everything else would take care of itself. But Robert saw the blind spots. Every time bills piled up or a major expense hit, poor Dad felt trapped by his salary, and the family tightened belts. Robert's respect for his biological father never vanished, but his loyalty to Rich Dad's lessons only grew. He realized society had trained people to worship safety and fear risk, never knowing that behind every big risk was the potential for a big reward, or a big lesson. Years passed. Robert's experiments became bolder. He took small sums from his savings, the money earned through assets, never his main earnings, and tried investing in tiny stocks in local businesses, always starting small. Sometimes he lost, sometimes he won, but the fear of risk faded. He learned to analyze, strategize, and act, skills that made each new adventure just another logical step. Rich Dad's most powerful lesson echoed in Robert's mind. Money amplifies who you are. If you're disciplined, it builds wealth. If you're reckless, it vanishes. You can be slave or master, but money won't save you from yourself. Robert's confidence deepened. He saw that the real power didn't come from the money itself, but from knowing how to use it, when to use it, and never letting it control your emotions. He watched as adults around him crumbled under the weight of jealousy, temptation, and fear, buying things they couldn't afford to impress people who didn't care. But Robert now measured life by a new standard. What assets was he building? What freedom was he buying with every dollar saved or invested? Every monthly dividend or rental payment felt like a step away from the endless cycle of work, spend, repeat, and a step toward a future he could shape himself. One day, as the sun set over his neighborhood, Robert found himself walking home, his pockets a little heavier, but his mind clearer than ever. He realized true wealth wasn't about having piles of cash. It was about having options, time, energy, choices. He was building a life where money would never be the master, but always a servant. But the journey wasn't even halfway through. So what does Robert's story mean for you? That's what comes next. How anyone can start where they are, use what they have, and build a future controlled by their own choices, not their circumstances. Robert knew that knowledge alone wouldn't make him rich. It was action that separated the dreamers from the doers. So with the small successes behind him, he stepped into bigger waters, the world of risk, real investments, and learning to handle fear. The first real test came when Robert decided to invest a portion of his savings into a small rental property. It wasn't glamorous, a worn-down duplex with peeling paint and a sagging porch. But Robert remembered Rich Dad's advice. Don't look at what it is, look at what it can become. The months that followed were tough. Tenants sometimes delayed rent, repairs popped up unexpectedly, broken pipes, faulty heaters, leaky roofs. Robert's emotions were on a roller coaster ride. Doubt crept in. Was this really worth it? Would he lose everything? One night, frustrated and exhausted, Robert called Rich Dad. His voice quivered. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I should go back to a safe job. Rich Dad's response was steady, calm. Every gold mine has rocks you have to clear. Wealth is built through perseverance, learning, and patience. Fear and failure are part of the process, not the end. Robert stayed the course. He learned to screen tenants better, to negotiate with contractors, and to budget for unexpected expenses. Slowly, the duplex started generating positive cash flow. Every month, rent came in directly into Robert's pocket while he worked elsewhere or rested. This was a turning point. Robert realized financial freedom wasn't about luck. It was a skill, a muscle he was building. At the same time, Robert's schooling continued, but his views on formal education shifted. He saw clearly now that school taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, but rarely the skills to make money or manage it. He understood the gap many faced, a gap between financial literacy and traditional education that left millions struggling. Determined to bridge that gap for himself and others, Robert started sharing his journey. He talked openly about mistakes, lessons, and how fear held back more people than lack of money ever could. Rich Dad's final major lesson echoed louder than ever. The most important asset you can build isn't real estate, stocks, or businesses. It's your mind, your financial education. Once that's secure, money becomes a tool, not a master. Robert's story struck a chord with many because it was real. It wasn't a fairy tale about instant riches, but a blueprint grounded in struggle, persistence, and learning. And for you watching right now, that same opportunity awaits. Are you ready to look at money differently? To question the advice you've been given all your life? To step into the quadrant of business owners and investors, where money works for you, not the other way around? It starts by asking the right questions and taking the first small step. Whether it's saving, budgeting, learning, or facing your fears head on. Remember, the road won't be easy. But as Robert learned, every step forward brings you closer to the freedom so many only dream about. If Robert's journey has inspired you, don't stop here. Like this video, share your biggest takeaway in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that challenge the way you think about money and success. Because your path to financial freedom could start today, just like Robert's did. Robert's story continued to ripple outward, touching everyone he met. He became the friend people called for advice, how to invest, how to bounce back after a setback, how to quiet the fear that makes so many freeze and settle. But for Robert, the journey had only just begun. His confidence grew. With every challenge, he became more resilient. He bought another property, this time with a partner, spreading the risk, sharing the reward. Robert negotiated better, upgraded his analysis, and learned the art of spotting value where most saw only chaos. Along the way, Robert saw a pattern. Most people's greatest obstacle wasn't a lack of money or opportunity. It was their mindset. They worried about what could go wrong, but never paused to imagine what could go right. Their fear of losing, of looking foolish, of rocking the boat. These kept them trapped in jobs they didn't love and lifestyles they couldn't really afford. Rich Dad called this emotional sabotage. He told Robert, most people choose comfort over courage, certainty over possibility. But wealth is built on the courage to learn, try, fall, and rise again. Robert learned to reframe failure. Instead of shame, he felt pride. Each mistake became a step up, not a step back. When a deal soured, he dissected the lesson and tried again. Wiser. When peers mocked him for being too ambitious, he remembered that all great wealth starts with a risk that others feared. Over time, Robert gained more than financial wins. He sharpened his problem solving, built a network of like-minded people, and became someone whose advice others trusted. He realized that those who thrive learn from every outcome, good or bad, and keep moving forward. Robert's world had changed because he'd changed from the inside out. And this is the heart of Rich Dad, Poor Dad's message for you. Anyone, no matter where they start, can build a new destiny. Start by learning, read, listen, ask questions. Say yes to that first, even if it feels small. A savings habit, a budgeting exercise, a leap into a side hustle. Build assets, create streams of income. Focus on buying freedom with every smart decision. Measure progress not just by what you have, but by how you think. And most importantly, take action. Because thinking alone won't bring you freedom. It's movement, courage, and a hunger to grow that makes all the difference. Now the camera returns to you, the viewer. You stand at your own crossroads. Will you keep following the old path, hoping for a different result? Or will you take the first step toward learning how money actually works? Will you dare to dream and then turn that dream into action, just like Robert did? Your financial future is unwritten. Each choice, each day, is a brushstroke on the canvas of your life. If this story has sparked something in you, if you're ready to see money as a tool and build a future on your terms, show it. Like, comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe for more stories that aren't just lessons, but invitations to change. Because the real journey, it's yours, and it starts now.